Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into the pages of history to uncover an empire that stood toe-to-toe with the mighty Romans, defeated their legions, and yet somehow remains a ghost in our popular memory. I'm talking about the Parthian Empire, the powerhouse of the ancient East that Rome simply couldn't conquer. So, grab a seat, because this is the story of the empire you've probably never heard of, but definitely should have. Our story begins around the mid-3rd century BCE. The massive empire of Alexander the Great has fractured, and his successors, the Seleucids, are struggling to hold on to their vast territories. In the rugged lands east of the Caspian Sea, a semi-nomadic tribe known as the Parni, led by a charismatic chief named Arsaces, saw their chance. They weren't just raiders, they were brilliant strategists and, most importantly, master horsemen. They swept into the province of Parthia, overthrew the local governor, and lit the spark of what would become a formidable empire. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was the birth of the Arsacid dynasty, a dynasty that would rule for nearly 500 years. Now, what made the Parthians so special? 2 words: cataphracts and horse archers. Imagine this: a wall of steel and horseflesh charging at you. That was the cataphract. These were heavily armored cavalry, both rider and horse, clad in scale or mail armor, wielding a massive lance called a kontos. They were the ancient equivalent of a main battle tank, designed to shatter enemy infantry lines with one devastating charge. But the cataphracts didn't fight alone. Supporting them was a swarm of light horse archers. These riders were masters of maneuverability. They could gallop at full speed, turn in the saddle, and unleash a volley of arrows with deadly accuracy. Their signature move? The Parthian shot. They would feign a retreat, luring their overconfident enemies into a chase, only to turn and shower them with arrows while riding away. This combination of heavy-hitting shock cavalry and mobile, harassing archers created a military doctrine that was almost impossible for traditional infantry-based armies like the Romans to counter. It was a symphony of destruction on the open plains of the Near East. The first time Rome truly felt the sting of Parthian power was in 53 BCE, at the infamous Battle of Carrhae. The Roman general Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, and a member of the first triumvirate with Caesar and Pompey, marched into Mesopotamia with 7 legions, over 40,000 elite soldiers. He was looking for glory and conquest. What he found was humiliation and death. The Parthian general Surena met him with a much smaller force, composed almost entirely of cavalry. Crassus formed his men into a massive infantry square, a defensive formation that was usually impenetrable. But the Parthians didn't play by Roman rules. They refused to close for a direct fight. Instead, the horse archers circled the Roman square relentlessly, a never-ending storm of arrows raining down on the exposed legionaries. When the Romans tried to charge, the archers would simply gallop away, firing their Parthian shots as they went. And if the Romans broke formation, the cataphracts were waiting to smash into their flanks. The Romans were pinned, exhausted, and demoralized. The battle was a catastrophic defeat for Rome. Crassus was killed, and the sacred legionary eagles were captured, a symbol of ultimate disgrace. Carrhae sent shockwaves through Rome. It proved that there was another power in the world, one that could not only resist Rome, but utterly crush its legions. But the Parthian Empire was more than just a military machine. Strategically located, it controlled the heart of the legendary Silk Road. This network of trade routes was the economic artery connecting the Roman West with Han China in the East. Spices, gems, and most importantly, silk, flowed through Parthian territory, and the Parthians, being savvy middlemen, grew incredibly wealthy by taxing this trade. Their capital, Ctesiphon, near modern-day Baghdad, became a glittering metropolis, a melting pot of Greek, Persian, and Central Asian cultures. They minted coins with Greek inscriptions, worshipped a blend of Zoroastrian and ancient Iranian gods, and sponsored art that was a unique fusion of Hellenistic and Eastern styles. They were a cosmopolitan empire, connecting worlds and cultures long before the term globalization was ever invented. So, if they were so powerful, so rich, and so influential, why have so many of us never heard of them? There are a few key reasons. First, history is often written by the victors, and much of our Western history comes from Roman and Greek sources. For Roman historians, Parthia was the eternal, frustrating other, the enemy they could never truly defeat. They weren't exactly eager to write volumes praising their rivals' successes. The Parthians themselves, unfortunately, left behind very few written records of their own history. Most of what we know is pieced together from coins, archaeology, and the accounts of their enemies. Another reason is their eventual decline. The Parthian Empire was never a highly centralized state like Rome. It was more of a feudal system, with powerful noble families often challenging the authority of the King of Kings. This internal strife, combined with constant wars against Rome in the west and nomadic tribes in the east, gradually wore them down. Finally, in 224 CE, a Persian vassal king named Ardashir I rose in rebellion, defeated the last Parthian king, and established the Sasanian Empire. The Sasanians, who saw themselves as the true heirs of the ancient Persian kings like Cyrus the Great, often downplayed the legacy of their Parthian predecessors. In a way, they were written out of their own regional history, but their legacy is undeniable. The Parthians stopped the relentless eastward expansion of Rome, creating a relatively stable border that lasted for centuries. They perfected a style of cavalry warfare that would influence armies for 1,000 years, from the Sasanians and Byzantines all the way to the knights of medieval Europe. And they presided over a crucial chapter in the history of the Silk Road, fostering an era of immense cultural and economic exchange between East and West. They were the missing link, the powerful fulcrum on which the ancient world turned. So the next time you think of the great empires of antiquity, don't just picture Roman legionaries and Egyptian pharaohs. Remember the thundering hooves of the Parthian cataphracts and the deadly accuracy of their horse archers. Remember the empire that beat Rome, controlled the world's most important trade route, and built a legacy that, while often forgotten, is woven deep into the fabric of our shared history. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want to uncover more hidden stories from history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let me know in the comments which forgotten empire you'd like to see us cover next. Until then, stay curious.